Okay, welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody coming to see Al and I. We kind of thought maybe there were going to be 3 or 4 people here, but glad you guys came. I'm going to just kind of highlight a couple of things. For my section, I only have 5 slides. I'm going to talk about just some district numbers, kind of give you a feel of what we deal with in the district. Then I'm going to talk about some poverty issues, and then I'm going to talk about mobility, which leads right to the report card, and then we're going to turn it over to Al to talk about the money. Starting out, we have a total of 3,653 students in Garfield. 72% of those students are on free and reduced lunch. Total number of employees, 508. We have 3 elementary schools, a high school, middle school, learning center that has 125 students in it. And we send approximately 220 students to the CVCCC for education. We also have 24 buses, 8 vans. We transport daily 986 kids twice. 16 bus drivers, 7 vans, 8 aides, 1 mechanic. And then when you throw in all the other things that we transport, and some folks in this room are some of those people who go on these things. For example, we go to the Cuyahoga Valley National Education Center for our 6th graders. Music Express goes to Ada, the musical festival, Medina, Piqua, Olentangy, and Walsh, all of those competitions. Students of Service and Key Club go all different places throughout the, welcome everybody. Hey, Mayor. Students of Service go to all different kinds of places. Our marching band has gone to Ohio University this year. Our jazz band, jazz performers performed at the Grand Hall Natural History Museum, the Institute in Chicago this year. Our Students of Promise visited Morehouse College. They went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. Our Spanish Club has gone to Chicago for the Chicago Spanish Festival. And then our regular trips that we go on throughout the school year, Zoo, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Natural History Museum, and those trips. Just to give you the gravity of what we serve in our cafeteria, we served so far as of today 209,569 breakfasts, and out of those 2,569, 180,077 of them are free. As you can see, lunches, 297,748 lunches, and 250,800 of those are free. They're prepared by 38 staff members. We also have 2,200 Chromebooks, 375 iPads, 750 desktops that are all supported by 5 tech people in our tech department. You could see that since 2011, we have purchased textbooks. This is a list of the textbooks. Can you help me out and pass those around for me? Thanks, babe. And you could see they're all the way from environmental science to calculus and down the line. This year, we have purchased for next year 11th and 12th grade ELA books, 11th grade pre-calculus books, and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies materials and books. Okay, you could switch it. As we're going through this, we're part of the inner ring, superintendents. Also through the inner ring, all the curriculum people meet with the inner ring, other curriculum people. Treasurers meet with all the treasurers from the inner ring. Superintendents obviously meet. Security meets. Tech people meet. So we have a pretty good group of people in our in our inner ring consortium talking about what we can do and what's important for us in the inner ring. As you can see, we are at, like I said, about 72 to 75% free and reduced lunch is where we've kind of slowly but surely have risen, but we've kind of been holding tough there in the last couple of years. An average household is 23,000. Children living in poverty have a higher number of absenteeism, which we all know about. Dropout rates, 16 to 24-year-old students coming from low-income families, 7 times more likely to drop out. 40% of our children living in poverty aren't prepared for primary schooling, as some of our elementary folks see every single day. And by the end of 4th grade, African Americans, Hispanics, low income, are already 2 years behind grade level by the time they reach 12th grade when they come to us. You can see the average rate of economically disadvantaged students across the first ring is 58% compared to 16% in the outer rings. 4 of the first ring districts have rates of over 100%. The average rate of students with special needs across the inner ring is 16% compared to 11% for the outer suburban districts. 7 first ring districts are at 18 or higher, where the national average is. We're at about 21, 22% of special ed students in our district. Mobility. It's defined as a student in a district less than 1 academic year. The average mobility rate across the first ring is 13%, with a range up to 23. The average mobility rate for outer ring suburbs is 5%. Here in Garfield Heights, at the high school, we have 1,222 kids. We have 786 at the middle school, 523 at Maple Leaf, 424 at at Elmwood, and 656 at William Foster. This school year alone, from when the last school year ended, the day of graduation when we all walk out of here, from that first day until right now, we have enrolled 1,008 students in this school district. Now think of that. We have 3,611 students. We have enrolled, new enrolls, 1,008. We have withdrawn 771 students. So when you add what I've talked about so far, the mobility, the poverty, which leads to our report card. And want to help again? Thanks. I'm going to pass this sheet out. It's not up here, but it's very interesting because, you know, we live in our little microcosm in our classroom or in our school or in our district or in our community, and we see what we see. And we really don't see what's going on everywhere else. So as you're getting this sheet, I think I jumped ahead one. Go to the next one. Yeah, no, next one there. As you see on this sheet, you got it? Everybody got it? It's not hard. This is another one. What's the matter? The second one? Yeah, that's the second one coming. Okay. No, that's not the secret. And you'll see Ruggs passing out our state report card from last year that's for that we're accountable for. So what I'm trying to show you is that all those other districts that are on that list, we had 4 Fs on our report card. I just want you to see the other school districts who also are having issues with the report card and the grades. It's important to understand what everybody else is doing, just not us. So as you can see, I put a couple highlighters up here. Out of the inner ring or the urban districts, you can see 2 of the 17 districts receive higher than a D. Only 1 of 17 districts receive higher than an F in gap closing. Only 4 of 17 districts were higher than a D in progress, and we were one of those. and only one of 17 districts received higher than an F in an AMO. I'll be honest with you, half the stuff that's on the report card, I can't tell you how they calculate it. I have no clue how they calculate it. You call down to the state, they don't know how they calculate it. So basically we are up against it, and we're trying to work through it. Go back to that other one. Some of my issues with the state report card, during the last 4 years, we've had 4 different tests. The state mandate to take it online. Obviously, all of you were involved with that debacle last week when the whole state went down and shut down basically every school district in the state of Ohio because they basically threw air under the bus and said it was air's fault. To me, that's unacceptable when you're trying to give a test that you want to validate and you want to have it with rigor. And that's a problem. We, as an inner ring, have organized an effort with our mayors. Mayor Kalova and I went to 2 meetings with other mayors in the inner ring, and we discussed some of these issues. We, as an inner ring, have hired an advocate now who is down in Columbus, working with Representative Duffy to change the report card and try to make it a little bit more acceptable for school districts like us. So you say, well, why would the mayor really care if we got an F? Well, think about this community and any community. First of all, you get an F, what are people going to say when you want to try to pass a levy? We're not giving you any money, you got an F. All right? Who wants to buy a house in the community that has an F? I also went to the realtors, over 50, 60 of them were there, Mayor, probably, approximately. And we talked about some of these things with the realtors of Garfield Heights. Because they need to understand too, this is an assault on public education. It's assault on minority public education. If you don't know, right now, Maple Heights will be up next year to be taken over by the state. Warrensville will be up next year, or I think they are this year, to be taken over by the state. East Cleveland is up to be taken over by the state. And it's got to stop. Because it's not only about minorities, it's not only about poverty, it's not only about mobility, it's about what Al's going to talk about, money. When they start taking money from you on top of it, it makes it even more difficult to even try to do the things that we need to do as a school district to make sure that we're educating the kids the best we can educate them. So you have a copy of the report card. If you want to take that and go to the Ohio Department of Education and pull up all the surrounding report cards, it's really easy. It's one click. You can print it and kind of compare. I mean, even though it looks the way it looks, we're not bad. But it's never good enough. The problem I have, too, with the report card is we need a win as a district, as teachers. In your classroom every year, you get a grade of an F. How do you say that you're being successful when they're beating us down every year with giving us an F? People don't want to work in a district where they're going to be taken over by the state. Who wants to work in a situation like that when you don't have a superintendent, you have a CEO, they get rid of the contract, they could fire and move anybody they want, and they basically want to make your school into a community, your district into community schools, is what it comes down to, the reality of it. That's what they did in Lorain. That's what they did in Youngstown, and that's what they're trying to do in Lorain. So some of these things are interesting things that you can check out, and it's a good comparison if you go to the ODE and pull those up and kind of make some comparisons. Again, I want to let you know, though, that it's important for all of us to have that fight for this report card to get rid of it, because it's not doing anybody good. It's not doing this district any good at all. So if you have opportunities, I know Ms. Lapelli wants to get more involved with trying to working on the report card and things like that. That's important. We all need to do that because it's our school district and we don't want to be taken over. And we got to continue to do the things that we're doing with the resources that we have to make sure that we're getting the best education for our kids. Because that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. I'm here to advocate for every 3,600 kids in the school district. That's what's most important. So whatever's best for them, I'm going to be able to do that and try to do that for those kids. Any questions? I know I was moving fast. I'm not feeling well. I'm taking off right after this, so I'm going to leave it up to Al. So I'm sweating profusely right now. Any questions for me? So, setting it up, seeing where we are, understanding where we are, will lead us to then what the state has done to us through our budget the last 2 years. So we're being optimistic about the next elections, and hope that a governor comes in here and looks at our kind of districts, our district, and try to fund us appropriately, because we have a lot of barriers in our budget that are set down by the state that does not help us. And Al, I'm sure will answer some of those questions. Question? Because they're all separate. They don't take like an average and average it. It's one separate part of the report card is progress. And that one is, I'm glad you pointed that out, because when you go to ODE and you pull out all the comparisons of the districts around us, we have done so much better than every district in progress. So I don't want to validate anything that's in the report card because I don't like it. I think it's not right for us. But if we say anything about the report card, progress from our district is good, because that shows that we're taking kids that are low and we're moving them in a progressive way upwards, and that's a good thing. Showing growth, yeah. That was an easier way to say it. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Al.
Thank you, Mr. O. I also want to thank everyone for coming out, and I'd like to acknowledge a few people that are here. Our board president is here, Mr. Gary Wolski, our board member Joan Chamberlain, Mayor, thank you for coming, Mayor Kaloba, and Council President Matt Burke, along with GHCA President Doug Summers and the OPSI President Michelle Haddon, and staff and community for being here. What I want to do is give an overview of the three main components of our operating fund. And it's the only time I'm going to talk about the operating fund, because the other funds in the district are restricted to their use. So really the main focus is going to be on the operating fund, which is also known as the general fund, because that's what we really have control over. There's three main areas that we have in the operating fund: revenues, expenditures, and then fund balance. And I'm going to go over detail each one of those. I'm going to start out with the revenue side. We basically get a majority of our revenues from two sources, from the local and from the state. And if you look at how that matches up in a pie, if you go to the next one, you're going to see the breakdown. 39% comes from the local side, 61% comes from the state. What does that mean? We're really heavily reliant on state funding and where that goes. And that is a product of more of an inner ring urban school district, that they're more overly reliant on state funding versus local funding. And we'll talk about a little bit of the challenges of each. So I'm going to focus on local revenue and state revenue. So local revenue, where does local revenue come from? As you can see right there, 88% comes from our real estate taxes. Then I put PUP up there. What is PUP? Public utility personal property. All the public utility, like your power lines and your underground gas lines, they have to pay taxes on that. Then we have tuition, City View, which is the City View pilot that we're sharing money with the city on from their tax abatement back in the day, and then all the local revenues, 2%. But the majority of our local revenues is real estate taxes. So I'm going to concentrate more on the real estate tax. There's three main factors that go into the real estate tax of how we collect: approved levies, valuation, and millage. No different than any community that you live in, no different from where you're at, but what are the challenges here for the school district in the city of Garfield Heights? We have inside millage, I'm going to talk about what's been approved by the community. If you can, next slide. We have a current expense levy back in 1976. We have 3 emergency levies. And what's an emergency levy? It's not millage driven, it's dollar amount driven. And I'll tell you the difference here in a little bit. We have 2 bond issues that are outstanding for the high school that was built back in 2004. And then we have a permanent improvement continuing. So those are the levies we have in the book. Those are the levies that have been approved by the community and the voters of Garfield Heights. So we have those levies out there. Next, let's talk about valuation. Look at our valuation. Every community gets revalued, a triennial update every 3 years. So I went back 10 years, and if you look at the valuations, let's start in 2009. That triennial update here in Garfield Heights saw a 9.5% drop in valuation of residential homeowner property. 3 years later, revaluation comes back around. What do we see? 22.6% drop in valuation in Garfield Heights 3 years later, 2012. Let's go to 2015, an update again. What do we see? 13.3% drop in valuation. So the community, one of the hardest hit communities from that time period was Cleveland, Garfield Heights, Maple. The inner ring communities were hardest hit by valuation. Well, what does that mean? Why does that come into play? Well, there's 2 components here that we're talking about. We're talking about residential valuation, we're talking about commercial, because they both contribute to real estate taxes. So let's go to the commercial valuation and see where that fell out. From 2009 to 2017, we see significant drops in their valuation also. So why is it dropping every year? Because every time there's a 3-year update, a commercial property gets revalued, then they can file appeals. Or if their property drops and their neighbor's property drops, they can file an appeal to reduce. So in between those years of revaluation, we're seeing the commercial industrial file for appeals, and we're seeing reductions there. So we're not going the right way. Now, can we go back a slide, Rug, if you would? In 2018, we have another revaluation. Everything I'm hearing is that we think home sales are on the upswing. I'm actually forecasting a 2% increase in our valuation in 2018 for Garfield Heights. And the thing is with Cuyahoga County, every community is different. While we were losing valuation, there was more affluent communities that were actually seeing an increase. So in 2018, I'm hoping, Mayor, we're hoping for an upswing in valuation because it helps not just the schools, but also the city of Garfield Heights. We think that that's a positive direction. Let's go to the next slide. I'm also thinking commercial industrial. We're going to start building up. I'm thinking a 1.7% increase. I don't know. Could be 0. It could go down. I'm hoping that there's an uptick. That's what I build in. Who knows where the revaluation is coming out? The county fiscal officer is doing the reval this year. We'll see revalues probably around November, December, not just on the community here, but on everybody's valuation in their community, on their houses. So how does that come into play? If you go to the next slide, you can see, once again, 72% of the real estate taxes come from the homeowners. So their valuation is critical to the school district. As valuation drops, what ends up happening? Same with commercial, as valuation drops in the public utility tangibles. If you go to the next one, I have a breakdown in the taxes. Let's go one more. Millage rates. That's the third piece of real estate taxes. Now we're going to talk about the breakdown in the city of Garfield Heights where most of the homeowners' taxes go to. And you can see we have a big chunk of that. We have actually over 60%. Keep in mind, these are not just the operating levies in this millage, but also the bond issue and the permanent improvement. So why is the millage for the homeowner keep going up in this community? It's because, as I said before, we actually do 3 emergency levies, which is dollar amount driven. The bond issue, we have what we call an amortization schedule. We have debt due come every year. So there's a dollar amount driven to the debt issue of what we owe. So what does the county fiscal officer need to do? They need to assess enough millage to collect the emergency levy amounts plus the amounts we have to pay off our debt. Well, what happens when valuation goes down? We need more millage to pay that off. And we talk about keeping valuations high, keeping property values high. So there's that trade-off. When your valuation goes down, millage goes up because we need that to generate enough millage to equal the dollar amounts of the emergency levies and for the debt issue. That's why when somebody asks, well, why did my property taxes go up? Because every year, if the valuation goes down, millage goes up, especially for the schools, because we have more emergency levies. Some of the other ones, it comes into play. But more importantly, it comes to the schools, and that's the reason why, because we have those types of levies. It's tough for the homeowner. It's good for us because we know we can plan on collecting that much amount out of the 3 levies, and we know that we're going to collect enough money to pay off our bond issue. So that's a good thing. Unfortunately, when you're talking to the homeowner, and we get later on and you're asking for more taxes, it's tough to take when you're the highest tax community. There's a correlation there. So as valuation jumps, and we're hoping it does, that'll lower everybody's taxes, hopefully. That's what we're looking at, and that's the challenge that we have when you talk about the local tax revenue. Let's go to the other side of the coin, the state revenue. This is the crux of what Mr. O was talking about. If a majority of our money comes from the state of Ohio, we are very dependent on what they do. We get foundation basic aid, which is 83%. We have homestead and rollback, 10%. Tangible personal property reimbursement, 1%. What is that? Well, the state legislators about 8 years ago, I think it was around 9 years ago, decided that Ohio was not a competitive state for business. So the way they wanted to make it a competitive state was to eliminate the tangible personal property tax. Well, who collects the tangible personal property tax but schools? Okay, we're going to make the schools whole, which they did for a while. And then the new legislators came in and said, and the governor, we're phasing it out. It's going away. So we're going to make you whole, but we're phasing it out. So that 1% reimbursement is going away in 3 years. So rather than the state legislators helping us, they're hurting us by taking more money away. But the biggest one, and same for homestead and rollback. Right now you get homestead and rollback. Any new levies as of 2 years ago, any new levies, not renewals, but any new levies, homestead and rollback no longer applies because the state legislators took that away. Say any new levies, we are not going to help fund that through homestead and rollback. It's an additional challenge to school districts to generate new levy money because the homeowner doesn't get that benefit. So I want to talk about state revenue and the foundation funding because that's the core of the whole thing right now. When Governor Kasich came in 8 years ago, when the Republican legislature came in 8 years ago, they came with a new funding formula. Every time we get a new governor, every time we get new legislation, they have a way to fix schools and to fix state funding for schools. So they came in with a new formula. Well, it didn't go as planned. So right now, there's three categories a school can fall into for state funding. You could be a formula district and follow the formula. You could be a guaranteed district, and what that means is you're guaranteed the same funding as the previous year. Or you could be a cap district. And the cap district says that, well, we figured out your formula, but it's more money than we want to give you from the previous year, so we're going to cap you at a % increase. Okay. Where do you think we are? Capped. We are capped.
How is it?
Okay, we're going to get to that. So how is that determined? Well, here's the funding formula. It's based on student count, ADM we call it. It's based on your poverty level. It's based on where you are in relation to the rest of the state. It's also based on some of your disadvantaged poverty. It's based on your special education. It's based on your transportation. All that goes into a formula. And then it goes against, then you get 6,000 per kid, that's the formula, times everything that goes through in the calculation. So we go through that, and every year I do the funding formula, and I go where I think we're going to be. So if we go to the next slide. In the biennial budget in 2014 and 2015, the state gave a 6.5% increase and a 10.5% increase. 16 and 17, that 2-year budget, the state gave us a 7.5% increase and a 7.5% increase. So, come this last forecast, I'm thinking, okay, we hear sometime in January, February what numbers they're talking about for the next biennium budget. We hear what the governor's proposing, we hear what the House is proposing. What do you think? The governor proposed 5. The House actually upped it to 5.5. So I'm building the forecast in May. So what am I thinking? Based on this, what am I thinking? 5%? Reasonable, I hope. Senate comes in at 3. They agree with 3. 3% each year for the next 2 years. So if you go to the next page, I build in 5s. I build in 5% for this year, and I build in 5% next year. They came in 3s. 3%. What's interesting about this column, if you look at it, we had a second column, we had a change in valuation per pupil. We went down in valuation per pupil. What does that mean? We got poorer. We got poorer. But look at our enrollment, our ADM. We only lost 0.6% of our students. So we got poorer. We only lost a handful of students, but yet we're capped at 3%. So what did that mean to the forecast right out of the box come October? If I'm forecasting 5, they came in at 3, you could see each year what the difference is, and you could see total at the bottom over a 2-year period of $952,000 less that we had to throw into the forecast come October. So, if we were not a cap district, what would we be getting? We would be getting, if we weren't a cap district and you put the formula and you see what we're capped at, last year we should have gotten $5.8 million more. This year, $7.7 million more. And next year, $8.8 million. That's what our formula says, that we should be getting more than being capped. What's the sense of having a formula if you're not going to use it? I mean, if that's the formula and you want to fund schools adequately, you're a capped school, that's where we're at. That's our challenge from the revenue side. That's our challenge from the state. We go by what we see, and we go by what we can do, and we go from there, and we balance our expenditures based on those 2 key revenue areas. Let's go to the expenditure side. As you can see, personal services is the biggest one, employee benefits and insurances. If you add those two together, it's 73%, which is really good. You want to be below 80. We're at 73%. We're doing good. Where we're not doing good is the purchase services at 20%. And what do I mean by that in the 20% of the purchase services? Before I get to that part, let's go to the next area. You can see where a lot of the breakdown is. Most of our money goes to instruction, public support, staff support, administration, building operation. Just a different way of looking at it, of where it goes in the breakdown.
What is this one?
This is by area. Instructional pupil support go hand in hand with, goes directly to the classroom for support. Staff support is mostly PD and some of the other contractual services that we use to support staff, health services, that sort of thing. Administration, and then building operations is our utilities and everything else, and our maintenance. Just a different way of classifying. There's two separate ways we classify it. Let's go to the purchase services area. You can see the breakdown there and where it's going. We look at tuition, we look at utilities, professional and technical services, and we look at property services. I have it on the next slide. I'm sure you're already there, but I'll go to the tuition. But let me just talk a little bit about what the professional and technical services are. So we got teacher substitute services. We have health services, OT, PT, speech. We have legal and consultant services. We have repairs, maintenance. We have licenses, BCI checks. We do a lease purchase on equipment. We have to do fire alarms, security, exterminating, elevator services. That all falls into the purchase service area. But where's the key? The key area is tuition. If we go to the next slide, you'll see where a bulk of our purchase services goes. Over $3 million goes to community schools. We also place students outside of the district that need different types of services. You can see that. We have Scholarship Ed Choice. Scholarship Ed Choice. Now, what it's saying is if we have failing schools, they have their choice to go to another school. We have 2 Ed Choice schools. But what the SACE says is, regardless of where your school is you're going to, once you're in Ed Choice, you can stay in Ed Choice all the way through to high school, even though our high school is not an Ed Choice school. Once again, I believe that's a indictment on or attack on against public schools. It's not an Ed Choice school. Why do you get to go all the way through? Especially after 8th grade. If you go to a parochial Ed Choice school, you should be able to come back. We should be able to have you back. So then we have open enrollment. We have 69 students that go. We have Peterson Scholarship, and then we have autism, just to break down. So you can see a bulk of our money, over $5.7 million, goes to tuition. Here's the issue that I have with it. If people hear me talk before, I have no problem with community schools. If that's where you want to place your child, here's what I have a problem with. State funding says that we get $6,000 per student. So if you place your child in a community schools tells the state, little Johnny is from Garfield Heights, but he's in our school. The community school doesn't have to provide any documentation he's there, and the state automatically takes the $6,000 per child off the top. Now, we have to go back and verify if little Johnny or whoever's at the community school to get our money back. Because we know little Johnny doesn't live here in Garfield Heights. He lives over in Maple, or he lives in Cleveland. But they already have our money, so we got to get it back. Rather than verifying first and then giving the money. The other issue I have is they're taking $6,000 away from us for that child. But since we're a cap district, they're only giving us $5,400. So it's not even an even match. They're not giving us 1 for 1. So that costs us an additional $600 per student right out of our budget for those going outside of our district. That's the challenge that we have with doing the tuition and the state taking the money away from us And they're saying, well, we're not giving you 1 for 1. So if you have 400 students going and every one costing us an additional $600, we are actually losing money. We're not even getting reimbursed for that from the state. Have an issue with that. That's our challenge. And then I just want to throw this up there. Where do we rank in expenditures for pupil? If you think that we're spending a lot of money, we rank second last of all the Cuyahoga County districts. I think we're doing pretty darn good for being second last. That's our challenge. Like, I don't begrudge anybody, but this sticks in my craw. East Cleveland. If you look at East Cleveland, you'll find that they spend upwards, and I'm not sure. But East Cleveland's a guaranteed district. They have 2,300 students, and they get $31 million from the state in foundation aid. And why can't you lower that for 2,300 students? Because they're guaranteed the same amount they got the previous year. So what can they spend per child? Upwards of 15, 12, 15. That's our challenge. That's actually our challenge. And I'm not begrudging them. I'm just saying that's the challenges that we face here in Garfield Heights. That's the challenges that we face and we need to deal with. Yes?
Will that ever change? Will we always just be capped?
Unless they change the funding formula, we will always be capped because we are poor enough and we generate enough students that the formula will push us way over. I mean, if we're 8 million over the cap, we'd have to gain a lot of valuation and lose a lot of students to bring it back. So we'll always be capped if they stay with the same formula. Now, we'll get to the challenges with the next legislation too. So if you go to, so what does that all mean? You compare the expenditures to the revenues, and here's what the bottom line is, and this is what the board gets, and this is what I always point out. What you want to do is you want to make sure your revenues and expenditures equal or come close. By the way, school districts are the only public entity that is required to do a 5-year forecast and submit it to the state. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that's a good thing. Proper planning. It allows us to properly plan and identify key areas for fiscal stability. But we're mandated to do it. We're the only political entity to do it. So what's the key to this one here? If you look through, and I look at 17 and 18, we're right there. If I look at 19, we're starting to creep up where expenditures in the forecast are exceeding revenues, and you can see by 20 that there's a significant gap. So what does that mean? So if you go to the next page, you could see this is the key area for me, and this is the key area I'd like to point out for the board. Revenue surplus plus deficit. So, what is, and when we go through, and this is what I like to point out, it's not down here, fund balance. This is the target area here when you start spending more, that's 652. That's when you have to start looking and saying, okay, we're starting to go into a deficit spending situation. We maybe need to start mitigating what we need to do. So we know in 19, okay, if you go with 19, you're going to see that, okay, we're see 652, but we have enough carryover that we're mitigating, so that's what we do. A lot of districts will tell you that they want to, you know, have a cash balance policy and everything else. We don't have that luxury to have a cash balance policy. As Mr. O said, we prioritize education. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about, a rainy day fund, because if I look at, and they've heard they say this, $424,000 out of a $44 million budget, that's crazy. I mean, I think that's just a crazy balance, because if we have one slip up in anything or one catastrophe in that year with $424,000, we're kind of like screwed. So do I ever want to see it here? No. But do we need to start mitigating and looking at this? Yes. So what we see over there, $1 million. So what do we need to do in 2020? Well, we're in 18 now. We're coming down to it. 19, we could do some things. We've already planned out for 19 to mitigate the 424. But what can we do to mitigate $1 million? Well, I always say 2 things we can do. We can cut expenses or increase revenues. How can we increase revenues? The only really way we can increase revenues is a levy. That's the only way we're allowed to increase revenues is ask the voters for a levy. That's the only thing we're allowed by law to do. But don't get me wrong, we're going to try to mitigate that $1 million, but that tells myself, Mr. Rowe, and the board that we got to start targeting 2020 of what we want to do. Now, what we say to each other is that, okay, what can we do now to maybe mitigate and carry that out a little farther? And we do that. Because I'm going to tell you in 2020, which is 2 years out, anything can happen. So what am I talking about? Anything can happen. Well, we have these things going on. We have the triennial update coming. What if it's higher than the 2%? Great. We have the 2-year state budget. What if the new legislator and governor said, well, wait a minute, yeah, we held you down. We're changing the funding formula, and we're giving everything that you asked for. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm hoping that maybe they come and say, okay, 3% was really a small amount. We got to bring you back. You're getting poorer. Maybe we'll go back to the 7.5, even the 10, and they come to some sort of an agreement that we can do that. They have to do something. We have enrollment numbers. So an expenditure, what if we have an influx of enrollment? We have to hire more teachers. That comes into play. What if we have less enrollment than we can, attrition we look at? But that's, we have 1,000 coming in and 700 going out. We don't know day to day what it's going to look like. We have kindergarten registration now, but if anybody's been to the board office in August, they know it's crazy. Well, they come after school starts, so trying to get that number down is hard. Federal, state legislation. We have a lot of grant money, and we fund a lot of programs through grant money. What if President Trump decides to take all that title money away? What if he changes the rules of the title money and says you can only spend it on so much? How does those impact the general fund? Well, state legislation. What if the legislators come in and don't give us the money we're talking about that we need for the basic foundation? We don't know. All unknowns. We don't know. I can give a good guess. I give a good guess in the forecast, and if you read the forecast, I give my reasoning behind that of where I come up with it. I try to do my best reasoning, try to guess as much information as I can, but I don't know. These are all unknowns. And the last one's unfunded mandates. Every year, state legislators come up with another thing. This year, it's talking about we talk about House Bill 70, which is the academic emergency and taking over. We have now truancy, that you're going to have to maybe do some separate things and hire people to go out and find truant students or do more, called unfunded mandates. They're not going to give you more money for it, but they're going to make you do it. We don't know where those are going to be. I don't know what it looks like next year with the governor's race. I'm not sure with the budget. I could just give my best guess, and we go from there. Basically, and all this information that I've presented today, you can find right up here on one of these websites. It's all right there. These are all hard numbers. I'm not making these up. You can go and get those like Mr. O with the report card. It's all right there. Garfield Heights City Schools. I have on my website, I pull as much financial information as I can. The forecast is out there. I'll put this presentation out there. I put the budget out there. We put as much information as we can on my website, the fiscal officer website, and it's there for the taking. Ohio Department of Education. It has benchmark reports. It had state foundation funding reports. It matches us up with other districts. You can go out and get that under the finance and funding. All that information is right there. It's all right there. Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer, you can look at all the different things that affect the district under the Budget Commission, including real estate taxes, delinquencies, valuations, millage. It's all right there under the fiscal officer. You can also go up and see where somebody's real estate tax is and how much they're paying or comparing and whatever. It's all there. Ohio Department of Taxation. The public utility personal property is there. The tangible personal property reimbursement is there. They also look at, some of the homeowners or where they're looking at some of the sales. It's all right there. It's good financial information. It's there. Next. Other things that you can go to and look at. We have the Open Line Community Newsletter. Every time there's an article from me in there, trying to identify some of the key important financial areas. We have the Open Line on air, the TV cable. Always good information there, not just financial, but the district. We have good things happening in this district. School's Facebook page, we do. Neighborhood news, or you can just email me, get you what you need, or have any questions. It's all right there. As Mr. O said, I'm a firm believer. I really think, and I don't, maybe because I'm getting older and I'm jaded in my thinking, I really think the state legislators downstate, and it's mostly the, I want to say rural Republican, I think that they are actually wanting, rural Republicans wanting to move poor urban districts to privatization. Because they're doing everything in their power to make us look bad and not succeed. It's just my opinion. We're getting poorer, but we get our funding cut. Affluent districts get guaranteed, but they don't need the money. I mean, if you look at expenditures per pupil, how many of those are affluent? Look at Orange, they're spending $24,000 per pupil. I'm not saying, the money is good if you spend it right, and what I'm saying though is that they're putting us in first ring school districts behind the 8 ball. They're also, and I'm going to say this, and not because the mayor's here and Mr. Burke's here, the council president, is that Governor Kasich, when he came in and he ran for president, built up the rainy day fund. Well, people loved that. I built up Ohio, I built up the rainy day fund, but what did he do it on? Cutting school funding and cutting local funding. So what did he tell the communities and the schools? Hey, go back to your community for support. We're not giving it to you. Well, gee thanks, because our community can really afford it. Really, we're a poor urban inner ring district, but we're going to have to go back and ask. But okay, I'm glad you look good with your rainy day fund. Thank you. So that's our challenge. Financially, that's our challenge. That's what we're looking at. This is our challenge in moving forward. When you talk about me doing a 5-year forecast, okay, I have my assumptions and I put them out there, but it's really tough to do when 61% of our funding comes from the state and they only do a 2-year budget. So after next year, I have to guess where we're at, and you see the position we're in. I'll guess, I'll try, I'm hopeful, but who knows? I mean, I did 5% and I thought that was pretty conservative, and they came in at 3. They didn't even listen to the governor in the House and they all agreed to 3. Where did that money go? That's the challenge that we see, and that's the challenge that we deal with. And that we try to do the best we can with what we see. We try to explain it where we're at. We try to do, and we go from there. We have good people in this district, and they work hard. And we try to do what's best for the kids. With that, we'll close for the night. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.